But in addition to doing this walking tour, there are a number of other things that we did in my 21 years as a teacher, and we continue to do. We have a local museums tour where we tour the Train Depot Museum and the schoolhouse, Myers Schoolhouse Museum that our Historical Commission has every year for 5th graders as well. And then when they turn into 8th graders, sometimes a scary thought, but when they turn into 8th graders, we take them on an East Coast trip, and they 7 sites in 7 days. And I tell them as 5th graders, start saving your money now, because they don't give this tour away. It's a school sponsored tour, but it is not a school funded tour. And when we go on this tour, I point out to them through the use of a brochure and for stops that we make of Sparta connections. And this is something else that's absolutely free, and I'd really like you to take this because it highlights the fact that Dorothy Hessler, 1964 Sparta graduate, was President Ford's secretary all the way up from his time in the House of Representatives to when he became president. Now, how many of you didn't know that? Look at that. All right. I love it. Okay, that's Dorothy Hessler. Her name is Downton now. She was one of our Sparta notables of 2016, and we just celebrated her last November. Don Bradford was a part of the Old Guard, and he marched in front of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in 1957. How many of you didn't know that? Oh man, this is good. November, show up on Veterans Day at the high school. We got a video that has been produced nationally about the Tomb of the Unknown, and Don will be hosting that. So mark down, it's a Saturday. When we get to Washington, D.C. on this tour, it's my favorite part of the tour. Number one, we have 7 names on the Vietnam Wall that we call ours. One is a Kennewick Hills graduate, but his family is from Sparta, a member of the Dunnebeck family. One graduated from Rockford but spent time in high school in Sparta. One's a Kent City grad, but he went through the 11th grade in Sparta. Anyhow, I split my groups into 7 groups, and each group is given a troop, and they're given information where they are on the wall. They go, they do a rub. I take their picture. There's a card that I want them to sign for the survivors, and so we put the rub and the photograph and the card together in a mail, and I send it to them and thanking them for their son's sacrifice, and very meaningful. And then we go to Arlington, and we have 2 troops that are buried at Arlington National Cemetery, and one of them is Max Walder. The other one is Henry Myers. He's a Civil War veteran, and Max was killed in Korea. And so what I do is, talking about that site, I go and sometimes surreptitiously, sometimes on the up and up, I get some dirt from the old high school site. I get some dirt from his 10-mile boyhood home, and I mix it together, and I put it in about 8 little baggies, and then we have a ceremony at Arlington where we get off the trolley, and it's about a 200-yard walk. We walk to Max's grave. And then I tell the kids, I don't know if this is legal or not, so gather around. And then I say a few words, and they put this dirt from home on his grave. And I tell them also, I said that you come back here in about 15 years, if I keep doing this, here's nice flat Arlington, and here's Max's grave. Got to work on that. So anyhow, that's another thing that we do. And there's 1 or 2 other things that have to do with that. So anyhow, we try to keep history alive and let these kids know that when they leave Sparta, there's a whole big world out there. And this trip does that for them also. It's a wonderful trip. I love it. I've gone 8 years, and I'll keep going as long as they keep asking me. Okay, back to the script. I'm running behind. Let's see. I also arranged for vintage cars to be driving around. That's what Dan's doing here today. So he'll ooga you a couple of times. Never fails that a 5th grader will get my attention. He'll say to me, aren't those old cars cool? And to think that they were in town during our historic tour. It doesn't, no offense, it does not dawn on them that it might have been arranged for them to be there. Yeah. Anyway, my part is to ride my bike from site to site interviewing the historic interpreters. As Dan Salas here runs tape, he creates a video. And that's what you're going to see afterwards. Every year the Sparta PTC donates $1,000 for its production. And we pay, the Historical Commission pays for the blank DVDs, we burn them, and we see that each 5th grader leaves Appleview Elementary with this remembrance of the tour. This tour is a chance for kids to interact with their friends' parents, to listen to senior citizens tell their story, and to practice cemetery etiquette. It's the first time for many of these fifth graders that they spend time in a cemetery, and we're going to spend some time there too. And it's their opportunity to get a bigger picture of their hometown, to learn about earlier generation who shared these streets, and to gain appreciation for what's been done on their behalf by someone who's gone before them. It's about history, it's about paying respect, honoring others, and getting out for a long walk and having fun while not sitting in class. You gotta say that's a good deal, isn't it? This kid's a student. And everybody seems to enjoy it. So if you're ready to tour, we're gonna tour. I'm gonna hand out the binders. I can tell you specifically which sites are on the tour, and I'll leave it up to you to find them.
I've heard of Jay.
Yeah, he was the horseradish king of Sparta.
Horseradish king.
He's also the one of the top left-handed violinists in the state of Michigan. But he had a seizure in one of the rainstorms this spring, and he fell into Nash Creek and drowned.
That's a matter of history.
Right, and that ended the Croninger line because we didn't have any more Chroningers, but I had two daughters, and they both married and carried on the heritage of the Croninger family through, my wife was a gardener, so that's one of the family lineage that we're looking at. And then there's the Smith line. My one daughter married a Smith, and the other daughter married a Katzenberg. I don't know if you remember Arnie Katzenberg.
You've always given us a whiff of horseradish.
Well,
Do you happen to have some with you?
Yeah, right here. I'll pass it around. I don't know if you ever smelled horseradish before. Take a whiff of it. We usually use it on beef. And my, like I say, my son Jay, he was a horseradish king at Sparta, but he could spot, this is all grown in wild fields. So he could spot a horseradish plant about 200 yards away. Well, the powder horn belonged to a lady by the name of Helen Fisher, and she was a direct descendant of John Croninger. And she gave it to Dan Chesley. For Dan took care of her in her older years, and she's since passed away about 10 years ago, I believe. And Dan had a sale, and he gave up that horn, and I happened to come across it. So, but it had all kinds. It had an 1823 date on it, and a lot of scrimshaw. Had a trader's knife. There was either a cow or a deer on it, and a dog, and all kinds of different things.
Today and here, I'd like to introduce you to Jane Posh and Joanne Vanderwerf, but I know them affectionately as Laverne and Shirley, but they're both Heath sisters, and that name goes way back in Sparta history as well. Ladies, you've got something to show us here. So,
Shorty's Monument.
Anybody ever heard of it? Yeah. Some of the older crowd.
I'm running into a lot of things that they haven't heard of. And I'm loving
okay.
it.
All right.
Go ahead.
Shorty's Monument was a World War I monument. It stood right in the center of the crossroads here. We don't know what happened to it. I'm not so sure when they got rid of it.
It had to be early 50s.
Early 50s.
Yeah.
But it is called Shorty's Monument after a gentleman named Shorty Hodgins. Shorty Hodgins was a gentleman in town who was sort of the traffic cop, if you will, who directed traffic around this monument. To get an idea of the size of it, if you put, say, a Barbie doll up to it or less. You can see a photo in your notebook. Look at how large it is. I don't know if they have the photo of the couple standing in front of it.
Yeah, it's a little deeper than
so
that
you
same
can-
page.
It's not
Yeah.
the real one. It's this one.
You can get an idea of how huge it really was.
They kind of superimposed it, I think.
Yes, there it is.
That real photo of it with people standing in it.
So Shorty would direct the traffic. People would tease him, pretend like they were going to run over him. If the story is that young boys would stand on the rooftops and throw rotten fruit at him. Anything else to add, Larry?
Sweet crowd. Yeah, it's just such a. We're all wondering where the monument went. Who would throw away a World War I monument? And so I've got to get to the village offices and look downstairs and find a work order that says take this out of here to wherever. But I haven't done that yet. So that's another retirement. Yeah, Barb.
My husband's dad used to say that the young men would drive really close to the monument and make the police officer jump on top of the
Correct.
There's
Yeah.
a little ledge.
Yes.
Yeah, so all the sweet things that they did back in Sparta. Back in the
Right,
day.
right.
Sharky Badger
Paul
over there
Badger
also
told us that.
Paul
contributes
Badger told us
stories.
that
Yeah,
story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's Shorty's and a really interesting tale. They did have a flagpole on it, went up to, and these were lights too. A parent of a student made this for me. I didn't even know he was going to make it, and then he gave it to me. And he says, "Think of Ken and Barbie to scale," and that's what it was like. So it's a very welcome addition to what we got in our
Do we
historic.
know when it was taken down?
Well, early 50s that's where I'm going to start looking.
Oh, my
probably.
mom doesn't remember it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe she just doesn't remember.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it could be earlier too. Could be earlier too. So.
Yeah.
All right, one last thing I want to hear from you ladies. Across the street, this wasn't always Maddie LaRue. What was it?
Wolf's Drugstore. And Momber's Drugstore was where the cellar is. They had a soda fountain in there that we hung out at. You could buy anything in there. Perfume, cosmetics. Joanne and I worked at Momber's when we were in high school. That was the dream job to have because you got to work with your friends. And so Les and Andy were at Momber's, and Dick Wolf and John Snyder were at Wolf's.
Good morning, I'm Becky Stumlow, and we are standing on this side of the street because we are going to be looking at the funeral home and learning a little bit about its history. So that's what we're doing. I have a picture of the original Anderson home that was built by Gorman Anderson, and it's a pretty fancy dancy house, I think, at the time. At the time they had a lot of gingerbread on it and everything. It was a very nice house on Main Street here, and after they were in it for a while, they sold it to the Ballards.
In 1924, there was a picture taken right on this yard of an unidentified child, and it was right in front of, I have to keep looking, I'm sorry, A.A. Johnson, which was the store that was right where Sparta Variety is right now. And that burned down in 1941, but Mr. Carter wanted to recreate the picture for the walking tour, and they needed a baby, and I was around, so he asked my mom if they could dress me up and put me in a carriage and take the picture, and my mom said of course. I kept taking my bonnet off. It was the greatest thing of my life.
No, actually, you see the name Hinman right there.
Yeah.
Amherst married Ginny Hinman. Now, her
okay.
dad was one of the first dentists in town.
Oh God, how about that?
Yeah, in fact, Amherst was also, he did everything for a buck, this guy. He did everything.
But the term widow's walk comes from the fact that when they were off to sea in the Atlantic Ocean, their wives would go up to the top of the house and go out on this thing, and they would look for their sea captains husbands to come back, and sometimes they'd come back and sometimes they wouldn't, and thus the term widow's walk.
So he's got this big furnace down here that he planned on heating his whole hotel when he got it built.
This was going to be a hotel?
This was going to be a hotel, centrally located in town, just a few steps from the library. And, well, then the Depression came, so it never got finished.
The farmers were paying the prisoners money for picking apples, and they would pick, 100 bushels of apples a day, and they would take that money and buy candy and cigarettes and stuff. And those prisoners, they actually, 30 years after the war, they sent letters back to those farmers saying thank you for taking care of us and paying us and letting us go back home to our family.
Yeah, there's so much history. It just blew me away. Like, I heard rumors that there was a POW camp. I never knew where it was or what that really meant for Sparta, or that they picked fruit and stuff like that and harvested stuff.
I thought it was a wonderful way to learn history firsthand, and it makes it a lot more real. I wish everyone would take a walking history tour with Larry Carter. It's fun. We're lucky to have him. It really brings history to life.
God bless the small town man, trying to make it any way he can. Bypass by the highways leading to the promised land. Go to work at the break of dawn, don't come home until the sun is gone. Struggling to raise a family on what was fertile land. One day soon they'll have to sell it all. They'll build a parking lot and outlet mall. And they'll say what happened to that small town man. They'll never understand what happened to the small town man, the founding farmers of our land. God bless the small town man.
You can see we have a very distinguished panel up here that's going to try to entertain you, and we have a very special guest this morning that we are delighted to have, and that is Mr. Andrew Carnegie himself. Would you stand up, Mr. Carnegie? Now, I think we got $10,000 from you 100 years ago. Is my memory right about that? You know what that would be today? You have your checkbook with you? Maybe you could catch up a little bit? Okay, to start our program, the big thing today is a birthday party. And I didn't know there'd be this many people here to celebrate mine. So I'm 81 today, and I guess you probably all knew that. I'm glad that you're holding the presents, because I'll open those after we've closed the formal part of this meeting. But I would like to start out by having Lois present or show you the birthday cake in honor of this occasion. So Lois, our librarian, everybody knows Lois, right?
Without setting the library on fire, that'd be something, wouldn't it?
I had asked Lois if we could have 100 candles, and she said no, probably the fire alarms will go off and we'd have...
I got the next best thing though, 100 years old. And you know what, I think we need to sing happy birthday to him too, because being 81 is a pretty cool milestone. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to the library.
Happy birthday, dear library. Happy birthday to you. All right.
Okay, we're going to start our presentation by some discussion about the history of the library, of all things. That's the reason that we're here. So To start that discussion off, we have Mary Nellens, who's been very involved with the library for how many years? Do we dare say?
I'm trying to think. It was 2002 I started.
She's going to give you some background, and then we're going to show you a video that's been put together. I don't know if you all are aware of Dan Salas, or if you know Dan Salas, who's back here on the camera. This man has been a terrific asset to the community, particularly to the Historical Society or Commission. And so we thank Dan again for being here, and also for helping us put together the videos that are going to be presented. So, Mary, start it off.
Well, excuse me, my seasonal allergies do play a part. But in 1892, Andrew Carnegie was the richest person in the world. Absolutely the richest person. He had immigrated here from Scotland in 1848, worked hard. I mean, he was only 14 when he immigrated here. And he started building factories, and he was fascinated with the steel industry. And he wanted to build a library for the people to self-educate themselves. This is how people, if they couldn't afford to go for extra schooling, they read in books and self-educated themselves. So he built a library, he built parks, swimming pool, laundries for the workers, and everything. And actually, he had put forth the idea of a free library in 1882 as a means of self-improvement.
A real history buff. So we asked her to add some additional insights into the life of Andrew Carnegie.
Don, I'm going to ask you if I can take your seat so I can
sure.
project both directions. Absolutely. And while we have Andrew here, I wonder if he'd like to tell you that he couldn't marry his wife until his mother died. He was so attached to his mother.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
Well, his mother was a real force in his life, and I think all of us who were fortunate enough to have a mother like I did and Andrew did, we are blessed with that. And he also had his wife sign a prenuptial agreement that she would agree that he could give his fortune away. So that's kind of an interesting little side point. I, of course, grew up on 10 Mile Road, but I went to school. All my school days were right up the road up here, and we would walk down for maybe twice a month. I don't remember, do you, Don, just how often we could come with our teacher to the library. And of course, this part was not, it was the old part. We would come up the front stairs, and the little children's books were over to the right. And I remember Hazel Anderson well. I do remember that her sister-in-law told my mother that Hazel couldn't boil water, but she could run a library. And I remember her beautiful flower dresses and her shoes that matched, and her hair and her red fingernails, all of that, even though she told Norma to be quiet. And I was again blessed with a little library at the bottom of the hill where I live, Bellard's Corners. The Peach Ridge Library was in the Parks house, and I went down there every Wednesday and every Saturday of my childhood to get books, and have been a reader all of my life, and have my own library, as some of you know, probably. I wouldn't know how many hundreds of books. He had the benefit as a small boy in Pittsburgh, 13, 14, 15, and he gave up. He didn't have a childhood because he had to go to work. But he could go to a free library, and he never forgot that he was privileged to be able to borrow books in Pittsburgh, take them home, something that was not possible for him in Scotland. And he never forgot that. And he felt that libraries were cathedrals, a holy place to worship knowledge. And in these hallowed, this is a quote from him, these hallowed buildings, the sin of ignorance was washed away, and individuals could improve their station in life. And we all know that the road to success is education. If you want to improve your lot in life, then you need an education, and that's so true today, as we all know. And I'm speaking as a teacher but I'm speaking as an individual too, that to encourage, as we're doing here with young people, to want to learn. And my mother used to say to me when I was going off to Michigan State, "Oh, Kathy, I wish I could get in the car with you and go to Michigan State and learn like you're going to learn." I thought, oh, I'm 18. But now I know what she was talking about, how exciting it is to learn. Carnegie believed that in America, anyone that had access to books and a desire to learn could educate himself and be successful.
It was 44 years ago. Sparta nearly lost the entire business district, December 3rd, with 31 degrees, with wind gusts at 23 miles an hour. Somewhere there's a picture of the thermometer on the back. Anybody remember the temperature that it was?
It was 82.
How much?
I think it was 81, 82.
81 or 82. It was across the street from Johnson Ford. I was in Norton Shores, as Don mentioned, and our pages went off. When I came up out of the little knoll, onto the knoll, I looked off and I could see smoke. Needless to say, I got here in 20 minutes. I did not obey the speed limit. Our first machine in, hooked to that hydrant by the dime store, when they got there, this is what they sang. Well involved. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of facts. I do want you to understand that without the volunteers throughout this county, there's no doubt we would have lost the entire business district. As soon as I got the word from my deputy chief what was involved, I called for as much help as we could get. We got Plainfield with their 100-foot elevated platform. We have engines out of Alpine, Algoma, Kent City. Marne brought some units over. Each one of those that I requested a chief along with it, or a command officer. The reason we do that is a fire of this magnitude, one person can't command the whole fire. So the theory is, and was, that you assign a chief or a command officer to each side of the fire scene, which we did. Within 30 minutes of the initial alarm at 8:44, Johnson Ford was totally gone, and 3 other buildings were fully involved. I did have a real scare. A good friend of mine was a county fire chief, Jeff Geldersman, and he was the chief of all county participating fire departments like Cedar Springs, Grattan, and so on. He was not over Sparta. And Jeff was an old-time firefighter, and as we got the fire under control, I had sent 2 firemen, Bobby Huck and Paul Johnson, in the front of Finch's store. And unbeknownst to me, they went out the back door. About 5 minutes after they were in there, the roof collapsed, the ceiling did, and it blew the front windows out. Jeff came to me and he said, "Taylor, I want to show you something." He took me in there, and we're crawling on our hands and knees between the shelves and the soup cans and whatever. And he said, "You see that up there?" And I looked up and he said, "That's a ceiling fan. Your wife wants that." She got it.
Norma Chapman is here, and she has an insight because she was a business owner at the time of that fire. So she was among the many of us that were there helping unload stuff out of the stores.
There's one thing about coming. I'm here because, as always, I'm the oldest person in the room. when I talked to Don, he said, well, your memories go back a long ways. I don't remember them laying the cornerstone. I'll clear that up right away. But we on the tape we saw that the library was so important to Dorothy and I in the summer when we had really nothing to do. There was nothing much going on, and we would come down and Mrs. Anderson. I had no idea she had her first name,
Hazel.
and she said she's Hazel. So, but I did have a business. I had a place called the Daisy Place, and it had fabric in it, which in smoke is no friend of the fabric, and the fires. I was going to come open at 9 o'clock. I came over the hill on 15 Mile Road at M37, probably about 8:45, and all I saw was black smoke over Sparta. I got as far as the Methodist Church parking lot. I could leave my car there, and I ran as fast as my little legs would carry me down the street. Fern and Jim Lundquist were having breakfast at Canosson's, and she helped me at the store. She worked for me some, and they came right behind me. I opened up the store. The firemen let me in to get my financial records out, and then they said I had to get out because you could not believe from 8:45 and in 10 minutes how far the fire had gone. So and I was on the corner was Keck Shoes, next is Momber's, next is Finch's, next I really have to have them here to make sure I keep them. Western Auto and Rob's Roost. Do you remember where that was? Rob's Roost Restaurant. Then there was the North Kent Leader building. It got some smoke damage, and I was next with the Daisy Place. Besides all my fabrics, I had consignment items that were quite expensive in there. So, but I unlocked it. They let me get my checkbook out, and then Fern said to Jim, back your car up here, back the truck up here, we're going to unload the store. And they went up and down the street getting pickup trucks. They completely cleared the store. Some of the stuff we took to Eleanor's. She took care of my checkbook and that sort of thing. Next door at Sherry's. And the eerie sense of standing in the street, having these great gobs of flaming material coming down all around you, and there you are with stores going up all around you. So it was an incredible day.
Over 15,000 Axis prisoners especially, were brought to Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and about 60% of these prisoners performed contract labor outside of prisoners of war compounds, and they were engaged in agricultural, fruit, and labor and vegetable harvesting. So while not all of these camps can be considered luxury, many served purposes and helped the common public. In Michigan, several camps were erected for the purpose of picking fruit and helping farmers continue their harvest in the midst of the war. So by early September, a winterized camp was set up in downtown Sparta, adjacent to the hustle and bustle of the small town. This was located in Martindale and I think Garden Street, something like that.
I belong to the Sparta Township Historical Commission, and we put on an event for veterans in 2013. One of the committee members walked into our meeting, and she had this very old, dilapidated 1940 style suitcase. She opened it up, and here are these yellowed letters from her mom and dad when they were courting during World War II. And she said that her mom had told her not to read them until they were gone. So what a treasure this family has of those letters. And we enjoyed some of them while we were working on our event. What a treasure. And Charles Honey of the Grand Rapids Press once wrote, it was a shame that letters was a lost art, because it truly has become that. And young people are keeping records on computers and flash drives, and there's going to be a day the flash drives aren't going to work, but the book would, And even family pictures are on their cameras, and how many people, my daughter's age, my daughter's sitting over here, is really taking care of those pictures and seeing that they're there for the future. My book, Lifetime Journey, Your Family Story. First, it is a month and day calendar. So you go to the month and day something happened, a special event, or you can go back and put past events too when you first get your book. You will put in the vital records of births and marriages, trips, vacations, post-life changes like family moves, new jobs, adopt a pet, and retirement. And I think I've run into a lot of people. They have a dog and they're not sure if it's 5 or 6 years old. Well, in the book it's going to tell you something real important.
When I came in here, it was basically, to maintain what we've got here. And I think our board has been good, faithful stewards of the library. I really believe it. We've backed the library. We've seen some additions. I know Mary worked tremendously on the Carnegie room downstairs, and we've took care of the building and supported the library, and the community supported the library. Congratulations to the library. Appreciate you having me here. And my only thing is I look like Andrew Carnegie. I'm not at all like him. I wish I was, in one regard especially. But it's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Well, we all have a debt of gratitude to the those women in particular that set the stage way back 100 years ago. So we remember those people and know that a lot of folks over the years have contributed to the growth and the development and what makes this community really good. Thank you again to our presenters. Appreciate your participation, and let them eat cake. Point of praise.